How's everyone doing tonight?
Good.
Yeah?
Fantastic.
It's a good evening, not too cold, not too wet. It's always a good thing.
North.
So thanks for coming out. Our groups are getting larger every week, or every month, which is really cool. Just want to remind everybody that we do this 4 times a month. We also have iOS, Android, and JavaScript as well. Always encourage folks to be a bigger part of the community. So get up here and speak. If there's something you want to know, chances are the folks sitting around you want to know it as well. Caitlin's going to go over a couple of changes that we're looking to do starting tonight, as a matter of fact, right? Outside of that, Red Bull in the back. I think everybody found the pizza. Soda's in the fridge. If you have any questions, just pull one of us aside and ask a question. We have some of our own folks speaking tonight. Joey, who's part of our Ruby and iOS teams, is going to be speaking tonight. So, but I'll let Caitlin do the introductions for everything else. But thanks for coming out. We really do appreciate it. If you have any suggestions, shoot Caitlin a note. We're always looking for new and innovative stuff. We want to make this a community for you guys. So feedback is always welcome.
Yes. All right, guys. So if you guys didn't hear me earlier, or weren't in when I announced it earlier, there is Wi-Fi available. It's UTech. UTech or UMeetup?
That's a great question.
I think it's UTech. UTech Meetup is the Wi-Fi. There's no password or anything. It's its own separate little outlet. Shuts off at 10 o'clock, so you're fine. So there's that if you guys want to, play around on your computers, on your phone, whatever. The tickets that I gave you guys, if you guys didn't get one, come find me before the end of the event. We give away a book, and now we have T-shirts. Joey's wearing one of them. A couple of our other guys are wearing them. Mike's wearing them. We give away a T-shirt now, so it's a new little giveaway. I'm still going to have you guys do the Twitter. So do the hashtag University Ruby for the bags. I've got 5 bags. So go ahead and do that. Something we are looking into implementing a little bit is if you guys are working on an app or working on a website, as long as it's within the topics that I have or maybe a little bit of wiggle room more so, let me know. You guys have about 5 minutes to kind of give a little demo on it, but it's more of a, hey, I'm working on this, I need help on this, or I want an opinion on this. It's not a, look what I've worked on, how awesome is this? It's a, I'm working on this, I have a hard time with it, please help. And so if it's within the 4 topics that I typically do, the audience would be able to come in and ask you questions. They'll also be able to help you, guide you in the right direction. So that's something that we want to start adding. So please, I know most of you guys are working on something, whether it's a contract project, it's your own personal project, come find me so I can fit you in somewhere. 5 minutes is really all it is. You can be a horrible speaker. It's not a presentation. It's a, I'm working on this, can the community help me? Kind of. So, I think I've covered everything. I think so, yeah. Next week for our iOS one, we've got somebody coming from San Francisco who has his own little startup. He's also going to give a talk, so we've got 3 speakers for iOS, and he's buying the 2nd round of beer. So that's happening next week. So if you want to come out for that, definitely.
Is their name Bryce?
No, his name's Chris. It's a company called, I think it's Critter Size is the name of the company. It's a startup over in San Francisco. So he reached out and he wants to talk. So I'm giving him 10 minutes to talk. But other than that, I would like to have Ian come up here and give his talk. Woohoo! So people can watch you on live stream.
What do I have to do with this?
Stick that in a pocket and put that on your shirt.
All right. So, I didn't come from San Francisco, and I'm not buying anybody beer. So thanks for setting that one up. Yeah, I know. Make me look like dog food. It's cool. Yeah. So, click the right button. So I'm going to talk about Varnish today. This is not specifically a Rails talk, although I basically recently started writing something using Varnish that was written in Rails. So there's a good combination. They work together, or you have to customize them to work them together. So that's kind of why this talk is kind of grouped together in this way. You can use Varnish to speed up just about any web app, but specifically I'll talk obviously about Rails. This is me, various information about whatever. I work at, generally most of the time is spent at UCF. Some of you already know that, but I usually spend a lot of time really making these slides like super awesome and super pretty, and I decided to just go black and white and hopefully not scare anyone. So how many people know what Varnish is? How many people have like worked with it at all? Extensively, like customize an app to work with it? You're scaring me now, everybody knows. There's a couple of you guys who know. So you can call me out on everything that I'm absolutely wrong on. So the guys who built Varnish, what the hell is it, right? They call it an HTTP accelerator, but what it kind of really is a reverse proxy that has caching that is specifically for HTTP. If that makes any sense to you, then you're already pretty good. But basically, you make a request. Oh, I'll actually have another slide that covers that. It also works kind of as a load balancer. It's not, you wouldn't use it explicitly as a load balancer. It's not that great at it. There's other things that are better. Whole thing's written in C. The whole idea that they wrote it was basically to make your web app as fast as possible. So they wanted to write it, as close to the middle as they could. And they're saying that typically the slowness, any slowness that comes from it is basically going to be network throughput and not necessarily the speed of Varnish itself. To give you an idea of like where Varnish would fit in your stack, that first set of arrows would be kind of across the internet, but you can see a fairly simple web server browser application stack. Varnish sits in front of your web server. And you can kind of think about, if we're going to do some caching and stuff, how that position in that stack kind of helps you not do a lot of changes to your app, but still be able to do some interesting things with cache, right? So to kind of talk about the advantages of why this matters, right? You kind of talk about where web apps kind of eat up time. There's network requests and latency of like asking for stuff across the internet. Eventually it ends up in your web server, and like in our case, if you're using Rails or anything on Rack, it falls through Rack, ends up in Rails. Eventually ends up in your controller, maybe back, Active Directory gets some stuff out of the database, which may be on another machine. Then it has to take all that stuff and jam it back into some text that you have to send back as HTML or JavaScript or some JSON formatting or whatever. Maybe you have some other API requests that are happening there, and eventually all that stuff kind of gets sent back to the client, and then the client has to go and make some more requests once it figures out that it needs like some JavaScript and CSS. Notably, the stuff that's in bold is the stuff that we kind of have control over on the server side, and it's also the stuff that kind of costs you money. If you're running this stuff on AWS and your stack starts to get slow, you're going to spend all your money where all the stuff is bold, and that's exactly where Varnish makes things super ridiculously fast. To kind of talk about that trend of things getting more expensive, I guess, these are reports of like the top 1,000 web apps, not necessarily websites. It's a little bit old, but you can see a general trend of more requests and more data. So you think about requests every time you, so on the top of the scale is basically the average web app at the end of, in January 2013, 90 requests just to load the like first page of your web app. Seems like a ton of things to me. And of course, it's just pushing more and more data. But every one of those requests is going to hit your stack, right? And possibly do some stuff and hit the database. All of those fairly expensive. So to kind of give you an idea of how Varnish fits in and what it does, basically into Varnish, you basically sit it listening on port 80 where you would normally have your web server listening. So instead of or Apache getting the request, Varnish picks it up. And Varnish goes through, and what it's trying to do is cache everything it possibly can do. At least for it to be effective, you want to cache everything. So when a request comes in, this is kind of a very simplified view of what happens. Basically, it's trying to figure out if it's something that can be cached, whether or not it has it yet, and if it does, where it should get it from. So if it doesn't have it in cache and it's not going to return it, basically it has to get it from your back end. But if it does, it can just return it right out of memory. So if you think about the efficiency of that, it never touches Rails, it never touches Rack, it never touches your web server. Basically, it just touches Varnish, pulls it out of memory, and sends it back, which is incredibly fast. So trying to talk about specifically what is a cacheable request. If you kind of look at that last slide thinking, okay, so what can I cache, what can't I cache? So there's problems with like very dynamic content not being cacheable or being cacheable in certain situations. Varnish is super, super conservative because it doesn't want you to cache things that you don't want to cache. Like, say, standing this up in front of, you know, like a banking website or something, and I log into Bank of America and go to my dashboard. You don't want that cached and sent to everybody else because that's bad news. So by default, Varnish is very, very conservative to try and keep you from doing that. So it only works on get and head requests, which are basically like non-state things usually. And anything else that's like trying to build custom responses back, that would be something like cookies, like maybe your session is set and you're logged in and you know, normally maybe your name shows up in the corner. We can't show your name to everyone. So by default, it's basically like super, super conservative, trying to only cache the things that it knows by default generally are cacheable. Also authorization headers. So that's the same kind of thing of sort of sending, it's similar to like sending a session in, but you can do it on GET requests. So if any of these things are set, it basically says that I can't cache this by default. Fortunately, you can change that. And you're going to want to change it to try and increase the speed of your app using, or to basically get the most out of Varnish. So how do you customize it? Use this thing they call the Varnish configuration language. It's written in a C-like language, and it ends up, when you start Varnish, it ends up compiling to C, which is kind of a weird thing. It's like the only configuration language I know that does that. But basically what it is it looks like a bunch of hooks that you override built-in functions. And all these hooks basically are what's defined here. It's like the life cycle of what a request looks like through Varnish. As it comes in, it's trying to figure out like, what is this thing? How do I build an identifier for it for something I'll like keep in memory? So if a request comes into like /dashboard, I have to figure out, Varnish has to figure out at some point like how it's going to identify the cache that it would store for that page. So it makes an identifier, and you can change how it, in each one of these steps, you can basically change what it does or how it's doing what it normally does. So yeah, you can basically follow it all the way through, whether it's hitting cache or getting it out of cache or trying to return it, or after it like makes a request back to your backend to actually touch Rails. You can do lots of weird things, like you can suck headers out of the requests that are coming from the client. And I'll talk about why you would do that in a minute. The other side thing that I think that really makes Varnish really interesting and really powerful is this thing called edge-side includes. The easiest way for me to describe it is a server-side iframe. I think that makes a lot of sense once you kind of think about it, once you look at it. So what this allows you to do basically is break up your page into smaller cacheable units. So you can say that dashboard, if you look at that dashboard on Bank of America, the whole page isn't necessarily different. It's usually just little pieces of it that are different for the individual users. So the idea there being you could cache the actual like layout of the page and take little sub pieces and cache those for that one user, or not cache them. So edge-side includes let you do that. Basically, what your app has to do is respond with this weird code that the browser doesn't know doesn't know how to use. It's an ESI code. What happens is Varnish makes that, the request comes into Varnish, Varnish sends that back to your backend, this first request, and it will return this, and Varnish will actually look at the results of that and pick up on any ESI includes. And if it finds them, it'll make another request to your backend. So this is kind of weird. You're actually, if you think about that, you're like, I'm actually taking one request and making it two requests. This doesn't sound like it's making anything faster. But what it'll end up doing is taking the contents of that second request, jamming it in, replacing the ESI with whatever that was. So I'll explain that a little bit more in a second, hopefully. So here's a magical product I worked on that is totally a great website. As you can see, I'm logged in here. This is actually the project I was working on that has Varnish on it on Rails. This entire page is actually cached in Varnish. So if I were to load this page, it doesn't hit my backend at all right now. But you'll notice that I have a login in the top. So what I'm doing is using an ESI there, and that ESI is cached for my current user, and the rest of the page is cached for everyone. It's kind of a mind pretzel, because you can keep doing this. So this one page is two requests, and I don't want to scare anyone, but these are actually also ESIs. So there's a bunch of other sub requests going on. So the first time I load this page, it's super heavy. It's actually making to the back end. But after that, it doesn't even touch the back end, which is kind of crazy. I think I described this a second ago, so I'm not going to go through it again, but if you're going through the slides later, this might be useful. So why the hell would you use the ESI? Obviously, conditional page caching. So you can cache portions of the page. I basically described all this already. The other thing that you can do is kind of optimize the stuff that you're building. So if you kind of go back to this, you could see like maybe parts of this are reusable. Like this block of HTML actually gets used on a whole bunch of different pages across the site. So if I cache that and use it on a whole bunch of different pages, I don't ever have to build it again. So the cache that I build once there is actually being used on 14 different pages around the site. If anybody has any questions, just feel free, by the way. Yes?
Well, I definitely see how this could enhance the sort of the user experience from the standpoint of faster page loads and faster interactions. Ultimately, does it typically end up hitting your server more or less? That's the
Right.
thing I'm trying to figure out.
So I think you can make a murder show out of this if you really wanted to. If you didn't cache anything, if for some reason nothing was getting cached and you were doing all these edge side includes, it would, you could make one page load into 14 requests. So it's something like as you're developing, you kind of have to really look at what's happening. And it's actually kind of cool because if you're using something like Rails, you can run the Rails server, which you can see all those requests coming back and you can see all the database hits coming back, and you can run Varnish on your machine as well. So you can pump all those requests through Varnish and test it out and see when it's hitting it and when it's not. So you can what you'd want to do is like as you're developing it, trying to figure out how to break it up. You would be trying to optimize that for maximum cache hits, obviously. So to try and talk about this, I tried to make a gem out of this. It's my first gem ever, and I haven't finished it yet. I started yesterday. But basically, I built a lot of that code. It's built into the application, but I'm just trying to rip it out. So at some point, I'll be able to help share this stuff with you guys a little bit more. But this is the kind of stuff you have to do into Rails in just about any app. So you're going to want to build a route specifically for these edge side includes if you're going to use them. And you want to namespace them in a way where you know that they're cacheable or not cacheable. That way you can keep, keep sane. Because there's going to be things that you want to cache for every user and things that you don't want to, and you have to be really careful about that, or otherwise, bank account numbers for everyone. You have to take those little pieces that you were rendering maybe in the header and break those off into partials, which end up becoming those edge side includes. You're going to have to strip cookies out of a lot of requests, which is kind of a weird thing to think about. Varnish by default, if you send it a cookie, it's like, well, caching's over. But actually in Varnish, you can take a request and you can do stuff with the headers. So you can strip out the headers and you can actually relocate those into different locations. So if you need to send a cookie from that main request to one of the ESI sub-requests, you can take the cookie values that you have for your session and put them into an HTTP header. Then you have to modify Rails to pull the session out of the header, which is part of the gem that I'm working on. Magically, I did get all this stuff to work, by the way. Obviously, if you have something like Guys wants to send a cookie on every request, but there's some specifically that you're going to have to basically uncache or tell Varnish that don't cache any of these. Any of the pages that deal with sending cookies or when you log in or anything like that stores that state on the user side. And then there's these magical things called ban and purge requests. These are not default built into Varnish, but they're very, very common customization to add to Varnish. That pizza's killing me, man. What these allow you to do is programmatically delete stuff out of cache. So imagine on like that previous page, maybe I've got an article or something that I've customized, or I went back and edited something. Maybe I want to delete that so that, because, let me start over again. So a lot of times I'll keep the cache. You want to be as aggressive as you can about cache. So the cache that I built for this site just never expires. And because it never expires, if you modify that page, it's never going to update, right? Unless the server gets restarted. But what I want to do is, because I can programmatically clear cache, that allows me to have that setting so that they're never loaded. But if that does change, then I can tell it to clear that stuff out of cache. That was a little bit roundabout, I'm sorry. So, who's using Varnish? Just some random facts that I found while trying to research this. Apparently 10% of the top 10,000 sites, some of the things you've probably heard of. These guys are all using Varnish. It's somewhere in their stack. which makes it somewhat valuable. But you have to realize the caveat, I guess, to this is you don't really ever need varnish until you're really starting to scale an application. What I wrote it on, totally not needed yet, but I was really interested in using this stuff, so I started researching it. But this is generally, what it's going to do, it's going to basically reduce the amount of money you have to spend on your back end, on your application servers and your database servers. What I'm doing is running a production app on a micro, which is basically no one ever does, and it's actually super fast. But it was kind of this was an experiment to use varnish and also to see basically how far I could stretch a micro. To give you some examples of speed results of this, because I think at this point you're kind of interested in that after learning as much as you have. So WebRick server, obviously super slow service, is the development server for Rails. I ran both of these tests using WebRick server behind it. So this is the main page to my site. Used A/B testing to slam it with a couple of requests. These were both set at the same concurrency, and the left one, three requests per second. That's pretty slow. And then running through Varnish, it goes to 2,000. It's like and to kind of give you an idea of what that, oh gosh, everything's ruined. To give you an idea of what that looks like, this is me on my machine. Does this get any bigger? It does get bigger. 2 terminal windows. The left one is running off the WebRick. I'm going to use A/B to smash the WebRick server, and then the right one is going to smash it through Varnish. So the left one, you'll notice I'm only doing 25 requests with a concurrency of 5. The right one, I'm doing 5,000 requests. Just to give you an idea of the difference in speed of those. So yeah, it's pretty slow. All right, so 5,000 requests took less than a third of the time the 25 did off that server. So you can have a really, really slow back end and have a really, really fast response and be able to actually scale it pretty far with this. It's kind of interesting. It's now full screen. And basically comes back to there's nothing faster than doing absolutely nothing at all. And I already revealed it, but epilepsy time. That's it. And if I have time, any other questions? Just start yelling. That's fine.
What kind of instructions, what kind of code do you have to write to control that process?
So the Varnish configuration language, it's a C-like language. It's built specifically for this, but it's kind of thought of, it's very C compatible. It's very restrictive.
You have to design your caching philosophy in a lot of detail, or does it kind of interpolate or adapt to what the performance of the system needs to be or is?
Yeah, hopefully this will answer your question. So by default, it's basically just going to cache everything, whatever the defaults are. So if you don't change that Varnish configuration language, it's going to try and cache things for like a couple of hours, I believe, and it'll cache everything that it knows isn't dynamic. So by default, if you have a site that's just generating a lot of pretty static pages and doesn't have a lot of logins and stuff, it'll be really fast without you having to do much. But the more dynamic and the more complicated your app gets, obviously you start to have to dig into like, can I cache this or not cache that, or what do I need to do with the headers and what do I do with the cookies and that sort of thing.
Is that an open system, or who?
Yeah.
Do you buy it, but is it totally open, or you buy a supported?
I guess I didn't mention that. That is a very good question. It's completely open source, so completely open source basically. So there's a small community behind it. It doesn't get changed a lot. Actually, I'm using version 3, and there's a version 4 out now, so it is kind of, it's actively developed on.
You go to varnish.com?
Yeah, if you just search Varnish or Varnish Cache, you'll be sure to find it.
How's that?
Sorry, you're good. I pointed, so.
How does that change how your logging works in Rails?
So yeah, that's an important question. Like if it never gets to that back end, you'll never see a request for it. So you have to either find a new way to handle logging. So you can have Varnish do some interesting things, like maybe start writing some logs to something, but you want it to be super fast, right? So you don't want to wait for disk writes or anything. So you might be like writing into Memcache and then later emptying that on some delayed job, maybe. Yeah, it becomes an interesting. Maybe you rely more on like Google Analytics or something. Next, yeah.
Have you had any issues using the ESI includes with JSON stuff, or have you used it at all?
I-
Mixing XML and JSON and file sounds like getting messy really fast.
I haven't had any issues. I haven't used that, so I haven't had any issues with it. This is an interesting problem, but I think basically it's just going to parse through whatever text comes back. So it'll look weird in the medium, but you know, to Varnish, it's just building strings, so it should work fine, as long as you're not that and validate it before you, well, with the ESI text in it.
Where do the ESI templates live? Is this something that you can point to within your application? So can you use like ERB to generate ESI templates, or do you have to put them in like a Varnish directory somewhere separate?
So it's part of your application. So your application has to, instead of a div or a block of divs, it returns that ESI tag.
So you're saying that it processes the ESI includes from what the application returns.
Correct.
So it has to hold on to itself.
So that, yes, exactly. So that's why if you want to use those, you kind of have to end up modifying your app a little bit.
Gotcha.
What I ended up implementing was just a modified helper for render. So like render underscore ESI instead, and it takes all the same arguments for partials and stuff and collections. And it'll automatically build a partial out of that and the routes and stuff.
That makes it agnostic too. That's nice.
Let's see other hands. Yes?
As far as the purge requests go, so like thinking in like
This
say
is
you have, like,
really
a to-do
distracting.
list app or something, you would cache your Git if there's like a JSON feed, you like cache your Git request, and then somebody makes a post, adds a new to do, then you would want to programmatically purge the Git request.
Right.
But say you have like your application server, and then you have a completely separate Varnish server operating. In what way do you programmatically like send Varnish?
So yeah, in the Varnish configuration language, you define the ban and purge requests. You actually have to write. You basically copy it off of somebody else that's written it before, but you can restrict what is allowed to call those. Because obviously you don't want one of your coworkers just calling ban on your site the whole time, just to try and clear the cache constantly. But you can restrict that to certain IPs. So you might restrict it to the IPs of the boxes that are behind it, or yeah. So it's literally you can just run a curl request to it.
And you can make it only accessible from the inside.
Correct. So the ban and purge is an it's an HTTP method that's specifically for. So instead of a post request, you said ban.
Oh, so you would set. Oh.
It's pretty neat. So like when you're developing it and you're like, crap, I can't figure out what to do. You end up like, why isn't it clearing this thing? You can try and play with those just by sending curl requests to your Varnish box.
Do you use this completely in place of the built-in Rails kind of caching, or are there use cases you could
I could see cases where you would use both. I mean, it starts to get kind of complicated. But if you have some pages that you just can't cache portions of it, or you can't cache things, there's still benefit to caching in Rails, at that level. It really depends on how you want to do it. And sometimes it's not worth it. If Varnish is sitting in front and it's literally reducing the load of your backend to the point where it doesn't matter, then it's over optimization. There's no point to it.
So how's this affected your testing?
This particular site is my first Rails site as well, and it has no tests. This was something that I had written in another language and decided to port it over, and basically was just like, I gotta get this thing done. So yeah, embarrassingly, don't have any tests for it. But I would venture to say it would be really worthwhile to maybe do a little end-to-end testing as well, so that you do, like testing it actually through the browser, so that you're getting what you expect to be cached and that sort of thing. Which is pretty complicated. Is this thing cached? The first request, make sure the second request that it doesn't hit the back end. You could do some really complicated stuff with it, but yeah, you could test all your caching scenarios as well. We good? Anybody else? Thank you. Thanks. Get out of his way.
All right. And while he's setting up real quick, I have an opening, speaking of speakers, I have an opening for February Ruby and for March Ruby. Those are the end of the month. So there's plenty of time to get something together. So if you want to do one, please let me know. Tonight would be really nice. If not, email me or I'll get a hold of you.
Yes.
And now it's time for Joey. He's one of our own. So, woohoo!
Yeah, actually, to piggyback on what he was saying, if anybody has an answer to that testing with a front-end cache, that would be useful because I'm working on it right now. And it's confusing.
You have Flux on, just to let you know.
I do. It's getting dark, isn't it?
Yeah, that happened to me last presentation.
There we go. Now it's the right colors.
About the last presentation, what are you doing to test it?
Ah,
Right now.
well, we just implemented caching on it, and we haven't yet. So
Oh, okay.
it exists, and well, what I do. So we wrote something unrelated to what I'm talking about, but it's if anybody uses active model serializers, I don't know if you have. It's a JSON generation library, maps objects to JSON. We wrote a fragment cache for it that works pretty well, but right now my option is just to turn Rails caching off for my tests. So that's not a good solution, and we will fix that, but haven't gotten to it yet.
I want to answer your question again later. I have something else.
So caching with the front-end caching with testing, we separated our functionality testing from our unit testing for that. We just went with Casper.js, which is a derivative of Phantom.js to test the production front-end.
Yeah, I think we're going to wind up doing separate sets of test suites, caching on, caching off, because otherwise it's going to get messy. So anyways, today I'm going to talk about an experiment that I've been working on and off on for a while. I had an idea a couple years ago because there's a few things that bothered me, and I decided to build it. And it works, but I don't actually know if it's a good idea. I'm sure a number of people have been in the situation where you spend a lot of time building something and then find out that somebody else already built it and it's amazing. So I'm going to kind of go through how it works and then give some examples, and I would love some feedback. So yeah, anyways, my name's Joey. I work here. All right.
That's another one of our own.
So I do Ruby stuff and also iOS. But yeah, this is going to go over SSH key-based secret storage in Ruby. So things that I don't like. I don't like keeping configuration information in repositories. Obviously, if you're doing that, please stop. It's bad. I'm sure you've seen reports online of people accidentally committing their AWS keys and getting like a $15,000 bill in the mail because they've been unknowingly Bitcoin mining. So yeah, keys in the repo, definitely a bad thing. But yet, I also hate keeping plain text secret files. Even if you don't commit them, they're living on your computer. How do you give them to a new developer? Are you emailing plain text secrets around? You read them. It's kind of messy. Some of the option is just leave them on the server, store configuration in the environment, the whole 12-factor app thing. That works pretty well, but then if you want to go change something and you have to change it on a bunch of different servers or send stuff up, we've ran into issues where things are out of sync. Yeah, passing around secrets between developers is a mess. And the other thing is when you're dealing with, if you use .env or anything like that, usually there's no history of when things have changed. You might not want to record what changed because it's all secret stuff. But knowing who changed things and when things have changed could be useful. So these are all issues that I've run into. And there are some solutions out there, Figaro.env, that solve some of these problems, but not really to the way that I liked, so why not build it? So I've spent time on and off building a new gem that I think will use a couple common technologies to help solve some of these problems. So the whole thing is based on public key cryptography. I'm sure at least a number of you are familiar with it. It's what backs SSL and SSH. It's kind of based on the idea that, kind of from some math that I'm not going to get into, but you can make secrets. You can have a function that can encrypt something with one key that can only be decrypted with a different key. So you kind of generate a private key, use a private key to generate a public key that anybody can use. You can put it out in the open. Anybody can encrypt stuff with it, but no one can decrypt stuff with it. Only you can decrypt stuff with it. So it's very widely used on any kind of communication over open networks. I already talked about these. So public key encryption is used in SSH. And if you do a lot of access with servers, you probably already have SSH keys and are familiar with it. So you have keys. So it'd be kind of convenient if we could just use those keys that we already have and use to get access to our servers to store some stuff. So that led me to Encipher is what I named the gem. I'm talking about it today, so I probably won't change it. But so it's on GitHub. It's public. It's open. Anybody can go look at it. The idea was to build a secure, convenient, committable, and that may be up to debate here, but deployable secret storage system. It's still in alpha. I commented it a lot and made it prettier so that I could put it public and not be totally embarrassed, but it needs a lot of work. Widely open for criticism. So I want other people's input. I think that it's pretty cool, but maybe someone already built this better. So it was at least a good experiment for me. So the thought is use public SSH keys to encrypt secrets for each user. If you have 4 or 5 people, you want to be able to use the system. Someone with access to the system can enroll them. Really, it's SQLite based. It just kind of stores everything in there. So anyone with a private key has, basically each secret is encrypted for each user. So if you have 10 secrets, it's encrypted once. Each one of them is encrypted once for each user. So 10 secrets, 10 users would be 100 entries in the database. Anyone with a private key can decrypt their copy of the secrets. And if they want to add someone else, they can re-encrypt them with the other person's public key. So you wind up with an SQLite file that is only readable by public keys. So that's what it is. What it's not, it doesn't mean that it's tamper-free. It's just a file. Somebody could delete it. Right now, the public keys are not hidden in any such a way. So you could encrypt extra secrets for people or delete rows out of it. It's not meant to do that, but because it's pretty secure, I've been messing around with keeping it in Git. So you can, and I know that there's ways to work around that, but if you at least somewhat trust people, you can know if it's changed. There's some feature enhancements that I'm thinking about for hashing the database itself and notifying people if it has changed, and we'll talk about that later. So the first thing, just go over the gem spec, because I don't know, it's useful. It uses Thor, Highline, and Awesome Print to have a nice command line interface. I would hope most people know what RSpec is. Pry is just a debugging gem. Clint Eastwood is something that I built. It's a cloud space linter, so Clint. And all the classes are based off of Clint Eastwood stuff. Yeah, it's just a linter. It runs Rails best practices, which doesn't apply to here. Reek and Rubocop, kind of with some standard configs to make sure that we don't do anything too dumb. So Thor, Highline, and Awesome Print are for the command line interface. SQLite and Datamapper, I don't know if you're familiar with Datamapper, but it's kind of an ORM that just is not Rails. I didn't want to tie this to Rails. Could have used Active Record, but it's pretty lightweight and easy. And then just some other miscellaneous gems. The one thing that will come up into play is Xedit. It's something else that I wrote. Lets you, from your Ruby script, pop open a window to type in and whatever editor you want. And then when you save it, it goes to a temp file and then it's read back. It's kind of like when you commit with Git, it pops up the window. So I used that a little bit later on to make things a bit more convenient. So there's 5 main classes, Vault, Encipher, and then CLI. We'll go through each one. So the security class is where all the cryptographic stuff happens. I hope these fit on here because they didn't fit on my screen before. I think they do. Cool. So we use NetSSH Key Factory to load a private SSH key. Most of the Ruby encryption libraries look for RSA keys in different formats. NetSSH will let you load your SSH key, which is useful because we all already have them, or most of us already have them, everybody at CloudSpace, and we use them for access to servers, things like that. So from this, we can call, if you load it into a variable, instance variable called private key, from the private key you can generate your public key, and then get a PEM, which is just a RFC standard for how to format some keys. Using the PEM string because it's also how it's stored in the database, and you can get at this method from a few different ways. And then you can use OpenSSL pkey rsa.new to create a new key object based on your public key, and there's a public encrypt method which will let you encrypt something with that public key. The private keys also have a private decrypt method which will take whatever you give it and give you the plain text back. So that's the security class, kind of covers any just encryption and decryption. Tried to keep it simple. Vault is an interface with data mapper to, there's a user object. Actually, we can go to it over here. Where did it go? My spaces got rearranged. So if we go to the models, this is pretty tiny. I don't know. All right. I can't make this bigger, but there's a secret, and secret has a value and an ID, and it belongs to user. Data mapper is very similar to the way Active Record is. And then this user has n secrets, and then a user also has an ID and a public key. So the Vault class, let's go to it. There are lock and unlock methods. So for a user, when you call lock, it will take their secret entry. Well, I guess we can start with, if we make a new secret, some new secret object, set the unlocked value and call lock on it, it will use the security class to encrypt it and store it for the user. Unlock is the opposite. So you give it a secret object and it will unlock it and set the unlock value to be the decrypted key or decrypted secret. Also have a few other things in here. Where is kind of a really crude implementation of where. It's SQL, but you can't query because everything is encrypted, so it's useless. This will go through and decrypt all your secrets and then compare whatever you passed in to try and find what you're looking for. And then compare is a really kind of rudimentary comparison here. This also handles enrolling keys. So when you have a new user, you want to enroll their public key into the system. That'll go through, decrypt all your secrets that you have access to as the current user with a private key, and then re public key so they have access to them too. Some other methods in here, user exists, revoke. Revoke just deletes all the secrets for a user. So you can take somebody out. The next class is environment. It's a subclass of Vault. Something that was useful that I was thinking is keeping all your secrets in one file doesn't really work. If you have 6 or 7 different environments to deploy to, then all of a sudden you wind up with this massive file. I know with .env you can have separate files, but then now you have to manage 6 plain text files full of secrets. And really the way that a server could use this is you could just give the server a key. So you generate a private key for the server, enroll it, and then a server would have access to a key. So each key is tied to an environment. So in the same secrets database, you can have development keys, staging keys, production keys, whatever kinds of stuff that you want. So the environment class is where that started and does a few other things. So it actually handles implementations of encrypting secrets on a per user, per environment basis, and then provides a simple interface to it. So if we go to environment here, it implements set and get. So if you call set on an environment, it will encrypt using lock, which is implemented from the Vault class, which it inherits from. It will lock that secret. It'll create new secrets for each user and lock them all. So you just call set, and now you have a new secret encrypted for each user. Get will go through and unlock whatever secret you were looking for by name. It uses that where method that I was talking about before. Has a few other things, list, which will just list all the keys for secrets that you have. Clear will clear them. Hash will return you a hash of all of your secrets, so you can just see everything. Then you can also set it with a hash, so you can just give it a hash and lets you easily see things. User hash is a hash of all the users and keys that are in the system, so you can see all the public keys if you want. We're using some of these in the command line. And then in Cypher, this is the public interface for the gem. It's what you would include in or reference in Rails or Sinatra, things like that. So in an initializer, you could do in cypher.configure, give it your key path, set your environment, and that's all you have to do. There's a require method where if that key is not present in the decrypted secrets file for the key that you have specified, it'll just throw an error. So I like to do this at the beginning of the app, require all the keys that you need, because I've seen apps start up many times without having all the necessary keys, and then they break, 20 minutes later without you knowing. So here's an example. If you have the configure set up from whatever in Ruby, this is strictly pure Ruby. I tried to make a point to not use any active support stuff, just because I know not everybody wants to rely on Rails. But you can just do in cypher.secrets, and it gives you back a hash, and you can just look for the database password. So then there's the command line interface. It's how I use it. We don't have it in production on anything, but I think that it's how most people will wind up using it. So we can go to the command line class. This uses Thor. Thor is pretty cool. It's just a nice tool for command line interfaces. You can describe commands, and then you just define the method, and you call your command line bin file, and it just runs your methods. So we have get, set, list, edit, keys. These just call the equivalent environment commands. So with this, and the one thing, edit. This is what I was talking about before, xedit. This result equals xedit.edit environment.hash.to.yaml. This is how I edit things most of the time. Environment.hash will get you all of your secrets in a hash. This converts it to YAML and then pops it up in an external editor. So one thing I badly need to add is YAML parsing, because this will can fail and just blow away all your secrets. But we can give that a spin right now. So can we see that? Yeah. So bundle exec bin in Cypher is where I have the base Thor file right now. And you just call edit. I've already enrolled my key, so it knows where to look. As for my passphrase, which is all built in, which is kind of nice. If your key has a passphrase, it'll ask for it. If not, it doesn't. And then I'm in Vim with a YAML file. So I have my secrets. I can go through, make this whatever. Sure. With this, with xedit, when I called this command, it created a temp file, decrypted everything, put it into a hash, converted the hash to YAML, put the YAML in the temp file, opened the temp file with Vim, and is now waiting for it. With the system call in Ruby, waits. If you use it to open something, it will wait until you're finished. So when I write and quit, and Cypher goes through, reads the YAML, breaks it all up based on keys, re-encrypts it for each user in the system. So now I could go to Cypher list. It's going to ask me for my key again. I built the edit part because using set and get and typing your password on your key every single time is super annoying. I don't know how to get it to use keychain, but I'm sure that's possible. So in Cypher list, you can see the keys that are in there. This just lists. I think I can do get. Oh, can't type looking at this way. So if I do get server, it should ask me again, and it gives me back the server. So all these are kept in an SQLite file that should be useless to anyone that gets it. Right now, like I said, it includes your public keys open, If you just look at the users table, there's just a user ID and public key. I would like to expand this to encrypt all the public keys. So the first person creates it, and then when they add people, they'll have, a public key database that's already encrypted. And as you add people, you can decrypt your list of public keys and then re-encrypt it for everyone. And this is also built in. So we have, let's do a different environment. So environment support is set up. Looks for Encipher env. So this is on development right now. We'll get, it's going to ask me again. We'll get our list of keys for development. If I change this to staging, I will get a completely different set of keys. If I spelled it right. Yeah. So there's nothing in staging. So if you have a server that has keys that are only enrolled for the staging environment, your server will only be able to look at staging keys. This would also let you give people in development access to environments, but not necessarily enroll them for everything. So you might want your developers to be able to change the configs for staging and development, but not touch production. You don't have to expose your production keys to anyone other than yourself, but you can still give them to people who can deploy, and the server has access to decrypt them. So, yeah, I think that's useful. Oh, those were my examples. So potential enhancements, things that I was thinking about. Keeping the public keys encrypted in the same manner as private keys, or as the secrets. I mentioned this before. It would just make it so your public keys aren't exposed. In theory, having your public key exposed shouldn't be a problem, but that worries me for, I don't know, reasons. Keeping a hash of secrets in the database to alert other users of changes. It would be pretty easy to hash the database file, and the next time that you go to use it, be able to tell if things have changed. I would have something like that because, I don't know, the potential for somebody manipulating the file is there. It's definitely better than plain text where they could just see everything and change whatever they want. But I feel like that would be a nice added level of security. And also because this is SQLite backed right now, this could really be piped into anything. So it would be possible to have a separate server that holds all your secrets. So you don't even ever have to deploy secrets. It's just they're there, and you start up your app and it loads them. Still doesn't fix the problem of someone going in and deleting them, but keep them else. I started working on a Railtie to merge it into Rails.secrets. So you can just set it up to auto-load. That's not done yet, but it's in progress. And then I also wrote a converter from .env because I had a pretty big set of .env files, and it just pulls them in, but that's not all in yet. So I hope it doesn't suck. Any questions on it? I would really like some feedback. I think that it's a cool idea, but I don't know. I built it as a learning experience, and yeah, I thought it was pretty neat. Yeah.
So it seems cool. I like the idea, but definitely it's walking into the space of more like the responsibility usually of operating systems and databases. So, like, was there really no other solutions for what you were trying to do? You know what I mean?
So I see a lot of people use Figaro, or Rails has their application secrets, which is just secrets.yaml, trying to write something that's easy for a lot of people to change and compatible. Some people do development on their Mac. Some people do it because Keychain works great for that. It's a great place to keep secrets, but my Ubuntu server isn't going to know anything about my keychain. So yeah, I was trying to find a better solution for it because we've ran into this issue a number of times. So this is my thought on that.
We have a lot of like open source Rails projects that we work on here, and we have our own deployments and implementation of them, and say there's 5 people working on it. You end up doing this silly dance of, does anybody have a .env file for this? And sending it back and forth to each other. So this kind of addresses an issue that you see a lot when you have teams of people working on the same application, and you have the public data of the code and then the private data of our own implementation field, like our database password and all this kind of thing. And obviously you don't want to commit it. playing this dance of like, okay, we'll submodule in a private repo, but that's annoying. We'll, you know, there's all these different games you play, but they all feel stupid.
Yeah.
So this addresses or attempts to address that, playing that game, tries to eliminate having to.
So I will say Heroku does provide some stuff to do this for you, where you can have it specify environment variables when your things start up. But if you're not,
That's what I kind of feel like would be like the normal.
but if
You're hosting an environment, what you'd have them in there, and everyone had some kind of access there.
right, so if you have 5 or 6 servers, Heroku makes this easier. We use AWS here, so it's just whatever we use. You can set them in the environment, but then you're either restarting your server and they're gone, or you can set them to load, which means they have to exist somewhere to be loaded. So then they're in plain text. And sure, if someone has access to your server, probably that's okay, but then they're there in plain text. How do you get them there? And having multiple people have to go in and edit them, and on multiple servers, they get out of sync. You can have your deployment tools do it, which is great, but if your deployment tools do it, then that means they're living in plain text on your machine. So somewhere they have to sit around and
But so do they have to exist in plain text though? And the reason I'm asking that is just because like.
well, no.
Well, what I mean to say is like, because even in Windows, if you just right click and say encrypt this folder for me,
Yeah.
then it will encrypt it. And I was recently looking at this. I was like, okay, it's approved by all these different government standards that this is legit, good, and awesome. And you can choose some number of users or whatever else that would get to it. So I'm just like, oh, okay, well, Microsoft did something right here.
So on Windows, this might be easier if you're using Active Directory and you can encrypt it and give access to other people that are on your network. But if you want to give access to your friend, you probably don't have that shared system set up. So you would have to send that file to them. And sure, it's encrypted. Like when you log in, it decrypts it for you.
Right.
But then what's going to decrypt it for them? How do you get it to them?
Yeah.
And then you're
So there's no general
pasting it in Skype or something, and that's not that great. So if there is a better solution, please speak up. And yeah.
If you're using the Windows for your application database credentials, and it's the same file that your application actually accesses to read the credentials out of, that's a security concern because they are still on plain text in disk for the application. If somebody finds like a sort of moderate bug, which is they can read any file on disk, then they have access to the database credentials.
Now, in theory, if you can read any file on disk, with this, you can read your keys to decrypt the file, since they have to live on the same machine. So it's not,
Storage of your keys.
you know.
Store your keys in such a way.
I mean, eventually it had to be encrypted somewhere.
You can put a password on the key.
Yeah, well, you can put a password on your key. That wouldn't work so much for server keys because they have to start up. But you can at least keep your keys as your user, and if your app is running as, well, you can probably put them in your user directory, which might be slightly more secure.
You can provide the server a password on startup to
Yeah, you can do stuff. If it auto starts, then server crash, you might have some issues. But yeah, I've been searching for a good solution to this problem that I like, and I felt like it should exist, but I've yet to find it. So I wrote this. So I hope people like it and use it and contribute. But if not, it was a great learning experience for me. So, any other questions? Yeah.
This may be a concern, maybe not. I don't know, and I don't have a solution either. But as far as once the secrets are decrypted and you're trying to edit them and it's stored in a temp file.
Yeah, I thought about that.
Multiple, like rewrite directory, like as far as like data recovery goes, if somebody may gain access to your server.
Yeah.
I don't have a solution, but I just
Well, so typically I only write to them on my computer. Of course, you read them and they're in memory, and if they're in memory, somebody, if they have access to your machine, is going to be able to get them out. I mean, Blu-ray keys have been changed who knows how many times, and it takes days before somebody's pulled them out of memory and can decrypt whatever. Right. So I don't think that there's any way to really completely secure it. I do think there's some issues with temp files. I am deleting them after, but just deleting temp files on your local machine isn't The best, you can do it all through command line, but it's super annoying because I have a password on my key. If I didn't, it would probably be better, but then I wouldn't have a password on my key. So, yeah.
So I have a couple more questions.
Yeah, sure.
Well, first of all, I think it's actually really cool, and it does solve actually. It seems like it could be much more convenient, definitely, like you said, working with teams. And yeah, because I've kind of run into the same kind of problems, and I'm just trying to find ways to use environments. So it's really cool, actually, and I probably will use it.
Well, thank you.
One question I had was, what was it? I actually forgot. Oh, wait, you're open source, so you got your file you're committing, but it's all encrypted, so no one can see it. But if other people want to start working on it, they have their own secrets, and then someone else has their own secrets.
Well, I would. Being open source does not mean open for contribution to everyone. We have a lot of projects that we want people to be able to see, and we would love if you clone it down and you do your own thing with it or contribute back. But we have specific configuration information for our instance of it. Not everything open source is tools. We have some products that the source is open, but we're running a server, running this code, and we need somewhere to store our secrets. We don't really want to fork our own repo and keep something separate that's private. So this would let you commit the secrets to it. I'm still not totally sold on committing them. They do exist somewhere public, and yeah, it's encrypted and it shouldn't be broken, but what if somebody is way smarter than all of us and manages to do it? Then they're still out there. So although if that happens, a lot of other stuff will fall apart.
My last question then.
Yeah.
It seems a little bit heavy. Is there a way you think that you can have like a thinner, I don't know.
So it needs to store them somewhere. I started doing it to a YAML file, and not having any kind of ORM was a bit annoying. That I'm sure could get ripped out and it just dump them into like lines in a text file. That would probably make it a good bit lighter, but then you also lose, because it's just text, the ability to, if you didn't want to use SQLite and you wanted to point to a different database, that would go away. So definitely there's room for improvement. I have like 11 tests, so it needs a lot more. I'm sure there's just straight up bugs in here too that I would love other people to find. But yeah. Anyone else? Well, thank you.
Alrighty. Give me your mic.
Oh, that's right. We're live. I forgot. I set it up and I forgot.
I know. You're my tech guy.
I actually think my parents are watching. Hi. My dad said he was going to.
If not, he'll be able to watch it later. Another reminder with so we do live stream this, but what's great is we do have a YouTube channel now. It's University Tech Meetups on YouTube. So you can go back and watch all the other meetups that we have. There's like 5 or 6 of them on there now, which is awesome. So if you've missed something, or if you're like, oh, hey, there was this really cool thing talked about and I can't remember what it is, you can go back and find it. So it's pretty awesome. They're all labeled within like the topics, so University Android, University iOS. But then it's also, my little funky names that I name each month. Yeah, they're all under that as well. But
Thanks for calling this one Master of
I felt very smart.
Yeah.
well, I love Metallica, but on a side note.
I'm not sure if everyone gets that it's a song.
No. Okay, so the titles of my Ruby are all song titles. iOS is TV shows, Android is video games, and JavaScript is movies. So actually, if you call me out on it, who knows? Maybe I'll give you guys a goodie if you call me out on it.
Why is Android
iOS guy. Yeah, I needed to pick something, and at that point, iOS was already named as TV shows.
I think I wanted to go for Schwarzenegger quotes, but it was too long.
Yes. No, we did have a good talk about that. We did have a very good talk about having Schwarzenegger quotes. So, yeah, call me out on it sometimes. If you actually figure out what it is, some of them are more obvious than others. Obviously, this one was not. But call me out on it. Who knows? maybe we'll have some fun with it. But other than that, who did not get a raffle ticket? I know you two didn't. You two snuck in on me. You guys didn't get one? Okay. Let me give some out, stop the stream, and then I'll get this giveaway going so we can go get beer.